Hello everybody, this is the 37th lecture for IELTS المساحد القصير. Today we are taking Book 15 Academic, the second test, test number 2. First passage, passage number 1. Could urban engineers learn from dance? We have two questions. Question number 1 to 6. Reading passage 1 has 7 paragraphs A to G. Which paragraph contains the following information? Write the correct letter A to G in boxes 1 to 6 on your answer sheet. 1. Reference to an appealing way of using dance that the writer is not proposing. 2. An example of a contrast between past and present approaches to building. 3. Mention of an object of both dance and engineering. 4. Reference to an unforeseen problem arising from ignoring the climate. 5. Why some measures intended to help people are being reversed. 6. Reference to how transport has an impact on human lives. And questions 7 to 15 complete the summary below. Choose one word only from the passage for each answer. Write your answers in boxes 7 to 13 on your answer sheet. Guardrails. Guardrails were introduced on British roads to improve the gap of pedestrians while ensuring that the movement of gap is not disrupted. Pedestrians are led to access points and encouraged to cross one gap at a time. An unintended effect is to create psychological difficulties in crossing the road, particularly for less gap people. Another result is that some people cross the road in a gap way. The guardrails separate gap and make it more difficult to introduce forms of transport that are gap. Let's start with paragraph A. The way we travel around cities has a major impact on whether they are sustainable. Transportation is estimated to account for 30% of energy consumption in most of the world's most developed nations, so lowering the need for energy-using vehicles is essential for decreasing the environmental impact of mobility. But as more and more people move to cities, it's important to think about other kinds of sustainable travel too. The ways we travel affect our physical and mental health, our social lives, our access to work and culture, and the air we breathe. Okay. We have 6 says, reference to how transport has an impact on human lives. We have the first line of paragraph A says, the way we travel around cities has a major impact and affection on whether they are sustainable. And we have here, the ways we travel affect our physical and mental health, our social lives, our access to work and culture, and the air we breathe. So, number 6 will be A. Reference to how transport has an impact on human lives, and for the reasons we have just mentioned. Okay, let's see paragraph B. Dance might hold some of the answers. That is not to suggest everyone should dance their way to work. However, healthy and happy it might make us, but rather that the techniques used by choreographers to experiment with the design movement and dance could provide engineers with tools to stimulate new ideas in city making, Richard Sennett, an influential urbanist, and blah blah blah. Okay. Number 1 says, reference to an appealing way of using dance that the writer is not proposing, because he mentions dance might hold some of the answers. That is not to suggest everyone should dance their way to work. So number 1 will be B. Okay, C. Paragraph C. Whereas medieval builders improvised and adapted construction through their intimate knowledge of materials and personal experience of the conditions on a site, building designs are now conceived and stored in media technologies that detach the designer from the physical and social realities they are creating, while the design practices created by these new technologies are essential of managing the technical complexity of the modern city. They have the drawback of simplifying reality in the process. 2 says an example of a contrast between past and present approaches to building, because he says whereas medieval builders improvised and adapted construction through their intimate knowledge. This is the first line in the past. Then in the middle he says in the fourth line in the middle, while the design practices created by these new technologies. So here we have a contrast, an example of a contrast between past and present approaches to building. Okay, let's go on. Paragraph D. To illustrate, Senate discusses the Peachtree Center in Atlanta, USA, a development typical of the modernist approach to urban planning prevalent in the 1970s. Peachtree created a grid of streets and towers intended as a new pedestrian-friendly downtown for Atlanta. According to Senate, this failed because its designers had invested too much faith in computer-aided design to tell them how it would operate. They failed to take into account that purpose-built street cafes could not operate in the hot sun without the protective awnings common in older buildings and would need energy-consuming air conditioning instead, or that its giant car park would feel so unwelcoming that it would put people off getting out of their cars. What seems entirely predictable and controllable on screen has unexpected results when translated into reality. We have number 4 says, reference to an unforeseen problem arising from ignoring the climate, and here it talks all about the climate because it talks about here 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line in the middle. They failed to take into account that purpose-built street cafes could not operate in the hot sun, which means the climate, without the protective awnings common in older buildings, which means reference to an unforeseen problem. This is the problem arising from ignoring the climate. Okay, let's go on. Exercise E says, the same is true in transport engineering, which uses models to predict and shape the way people move through the city. Again, these models are necessary, but they are built on specific world views in which certain forms of efficiency and safety are considered and other experience of the city ignored. Designs that seem logical in models appear counter-intuitive in the actual experience of their users. The guardrails that will be familiar to anyone who has attempted to cross a British road, for example, were an engineering solution to pedestrian safety based on models that prioritize the smooth flow of traffic. On wide major roads, they often guide pedestrians to specific crossing points and slow down their progress across the road by using staggered access points to divide the crossing into 1 for each carriageway. Blah blah blah. Number 5 says why some measures intended to help people are being reversed. So, because he's talking about here, the same is true in transport engineering, which uses models to predict and shape the way people move through the city. Again, these models are necessary, but they are built on specific world views in which certain forms of efficiency and safety are considered, and other experiences of the city ignored. This is the main reason, because it means the measures they measured it on an ideal thing, which means they focused on some points and left the other points. That means some measures intended to help people are being reversed, which means they gave opposite impacts. They had opposite impacts on people. Okay, let's go on. Paragraph F says, if their designers had the tools to think with their bodies like dancers and imagine how these barriers would feel, there might have been a better solution. In order to bring about fundamental changes to the way we use our cities, engineering will need to develop a richer understanding of why people move in certain ways. So 3 says mention of an object of both dance and engineering, and here they said like dancers in the first line, and then in the third line engineering will need to develop a richer understanding. Okay, so let's retell the answers. Number 1 is B, number 2 is C, number 3 is F, number 4 is D, number 5 is E, number 6 is A. Pay attention to those answers. It doesn't say an MB. That means there is no nota bene, which means you cannot repeat the answer, the paragraph and the answers. For example, each paragraph will be used once only. You cannot use it twice because there is no nota bene. Okay, paragraph G has no answers. Okay, now the answers of the gaps from 7 to 13, as I remember when I read paragraph E, it mentioned something about guardrails and the British roads. Let's move to paragraph E again to answer. It says guardrails. When we have such a question like this one, 7 to 13, 99% you will find all the answers in one paragraph. 99%. Okay, guardrails. It says guardrails were introduced on British roads to improve the gap and so on. Let's see, paragraph E. The same is true in transport engineering, which uses models to predict the shape the way people move through the city. Again, these models are necessary, but they are built on specific world views in which certain forms of efficiency and safety are considered and other experiences of the city ignored. Until this moment, we have nothing. Designs that seem logical in models appear counterintuitive in the actual experience of their users. The guardrails that will be familiar to anyone who has attempted to cross a British road, for example, were an engineering solution to pedestrian safety. It says guardrails were introduced on British roads to improve the safety. The answer of number 7 is safety. Why? Because it says were an engineering solution to pedestrian safety, and here to improve the safety. Okay, let's go on with the choices of pedestrians while ensuring that the movement of gap is not disrupted. Let's go on to see here based on models that prioritize the smooth flow of traffic, that prioritize of the movement of the traffic. Okay, so we also have here pedestrians are led to access points and encouraged to cross one gap at a time. Let's see here. On wide major roads, they often guide pedestrians to specific crossing points and slow down their progress across the road by using stacked access points to divide the crossing into two, one for each carriageway. So the answer of 9 will be carriageway, because it says to cross one at a time, one carriageway at a time. So 7 will be safety, for the reason I mentioned. Traffic is number 8, and number 9 carriageway. Let's go on. Let's see the question. An unintended effect is to create psychological difficulties in crossing the road, particularly for less gap people. Let's go on with the paragraph to see the answer here. Of number 10, let's see. We're entering here. In doing so, they make a crossing feel longer, introducing psychological barriers greatly impacting those that are the least mobile, and here particularly for less mobile people. So the answer of number 10 will be mobile. Another result is that some people cross the road in a gap way. Let's go on with it. And encouraging others to make dangerous crossing to get around the guardrails. So we have another result is that some people cross the road in a dangerous way. So number 10 will be dangerous, because here it says and encouraging others to make dangerous crossing to get around the guardrails. So number 11 will be dangerous. Let's go on with the question. The guardrails separate gap and make it more difficult to introduce forms of transport that are gap. Separate and to make it difficult to introduce forms of transport that are gap. Okay, let's see with the paragraph. These barriers don't just make it harder to cross the road, they divide communities. That means separate communities. So number 12 will be communities. And decrease opportunities, which means make it more difficult to introduce. Decrease opportunities for healthy transport, forms of transport that are. So number 13 will be healthy, because which says decrease opportunities for healthy transport. So that means number 7 will be safety, 8 will be traffic, 9 carriageway, 10 mobile, 11 dangerous, 12 communities, and 13 healthy. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this lecture, please press the button of subscribe. If you have any questions, please write them in the comments. If you have any criticism, please write it in the comments too. Thanks for watching. That was Mr. Haidar Al-Qasir with you.